Week one of the college football season is upon us. Last week we had week zero, and I felt like week zero was the most memorable week zero we've had in a few years. It all started in Dublin, Ireland, Georgia Tech upsetting number 10 Florida State with a game-winning field goal as time expired. Montana State rallied from 17 points down in the fourth quarter to win against New Mexico in what was Bronco Mendenhall's return to coaching college football. SMU rallied late to win against Nevada on the road, and the night ended with Delaware State and Hawaii, where Delaware State was in the game for the most part. The game didn't get away from them until the beginning of the fourth quarter, and Hawaii started to pull away. But I have to give Delaware State credit when you consider the fact that it was very difficult on Delaware State, as they had a difficult time even getting to Hawaii, as they came in later than when they wanted to. The fact they held their own, they didn't let the game get away from them until the very end. Much respect to Delaware State. And now we look ahead to week one, the 7 matchups being predicted this week. Thursday nights, North Dakota State and Colorado game. Labor Day nights, Boston College, Florida State game. Penn State, West Virginia. Miami and Florida. Clemson and Georgia. USC and LSU. And wrapping things up with the college game day game of the week, Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Without further ado, let's get right into the week one predictions. Kicking things off with North Dakota State and Colorado. This will be a Thursday night game on ESPN, and all eyes will be on this game, as Colorado has once again been one of the biggest talks in college football coming into this season, and it is year number 2 under Deion Sanders at Colorado. And they begin their 2024 campaign against North Dakota State, an FCS team that you do not want to see on your schedule. North Dakota State may be an FCS team, but they are the best of the best when it comes to the FCS. And that may be saying something considering the fact they haven't won the FCS championship in a few years now. But North Dakota State, they're a very disciplined team. If you are going to win against North Dakota State, whether you're an FBS or an FCS team, you are going to have to earn it. You're going to have to play all 60 minutes against the North Dakota State team, because that's what they make you do. North Dakota State has a strong history against FBS teams. 9-4 all time against FBS opponents. They had a 6-game winning streak against FBS opponents until 2022, when they lost to Arizona. But Arizona, they had to really work in that game. They really had to play all 60 minutes. It was a very close game. Colorado was 4-8 last season, despite starting off 3-0. They have 16 returning starters, while North Dakota State, they have 12 returning starters. North Dakota State 5 on offense, 7 on defense. Colorado 8 on offense and 8 on defense. There's been talks about Colorado, how they're going to be so much improved this season with what they did in the transfer portal in the offseason. The transfer portal pickup who sticks out to you the most, Dallin Hayden, former Ohio State running back. And Dallin Hayden, he stepped up at Ohio State when he was called upon. Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are among the returning starters for the Buffaloes this season. And I am very intrigued to see if those two take the next leap. It would really intrigue North Dakota State to run the football early on in this game, in my opinion. As Colorado, as much as you want to acknowledge how they did in the transfer portal, improving on the offensive line and on the defensive line. Colorado was 107th in run defense in 2023. And Colorado, they were not disciplined at all last season, as they were the third most penalized team last season. And I do feel like if the discipline does not improve from last year, I think North Dakota State, they will be able to take advantage of that. And we will see how improved Colorado's offensive line will be. I feel like there's not much else to go but up in this situation here, as they were 129th in least sacks allowed this past season. I am going to pick Colorado to win this game, but I would not be surprised if North Dakota State won this game, given the fact of their strong history against FBS opponents. I do think the worst case scenario here, North Dakota State, they at least cover the points, which I believe right now it's 9.5. But I do have Colorado winning outright and getting their 2024 season out to a strong start in a game where I'm feeling like Colorado's going to have to play all 60 minutes to win this game. Boston College and Florida State. This game will be on Labor Day night. For Boston College, this is the first game of the Bill O'Brien era. They returned 17 starters from last season, 9 on offense and 8 on defense. Among the returning starters, quarterback Thomas Castellanos. He only completed 57.3% of his passes last year. He threw 2,248 passing yards, 15 touchdown passes, but 14 interceptions. But he has shown that he's effective on the ground, as last season he had 1,113 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns. And just like Haynes King, going into the matchup last week against Florida State, I was curious to see how he would improve from the amount of interceptions that he threw last season. And so far, he's off to a good start, as he played clean football last week against the Seminoles. Can Thomas Castellanos do the same? 2 transfer portal pickups who stick out to me for Boston College. Running back Trayshawn Ward. He was at Kansas State. And wide receiver Jaden McGowan from Vanderbilt. Running back Kyle Robichaud. He had 8 rushing touchdowns last season and 780 yards. I do think for Boston College to not only stay in this game, but to pull off the upset, the depth of their running game is going to be important. And I do think Boston College, considering how Florida State is feeling right now, with them losing last week to open up the season against Georgia Tech in Dublin, Ireland, it was a long flight back for the Seminoles, especially being on the losing end, with how they lost in a game where they felt like they could have and should have won. They do have 2 more days to get back out there compared to if the game was on Saturday. So that could be on their minds going into this game, knowing they are the talk of college football this week. That's the number one topic in college football, about how they lost as a top 10 team to open up the season. And for Florida State, what you're hoping for going into this game, you're hoping that Colorado loses to North Dakota State on Thursday night. And the reason why you are is because all the attention is on you right now, given that you've lost a top 10 team to start the year. But if Colorado loses, then all the attention turns to Colorado, because Colorado was a team that was getting a lot of hype going into the season. And Florida State in this matchup right now is favored by 17.5. And it's interesting because I remember when the spread for this game was about 21.5 earlier in the offseason. This is a matchup Florida State only won last year by a score of 31-29. And it was a game where Florida State, they were completely undisciplined. I believe it was 16 or 17 penalties committed by Florida State in this game. I don't remember the exact number, but it was a lot. I do think Florida State bounces back and they win this game on Labor Day night. But I do think Boston College, they do stay in this game from start to finish, or at least they stay in the game long enough to cover the 17.5. And I do think that there is value in taking the points here with Boston College when you consider the fact that Boston College has a mobile quarterback in Thomas Castellanos, where he has the ability to scramble and extend plays, which extends drives. Florida State wins, but I think Boston College, they stay in this game enough to cover the 17.5. Penn State and West Virginia, and these two teams faced off last season in Happy Valley, where Penn State won by a score of 38-15. And now these two face off in Morgantown, and it will be a noon Eastern kickoff game. And both of these teams, they have quite a bit of expectations going into the season. Penn State, especially. West Virginia, they may not have the expectation that Penn State has, but there has been some people I've seen throughout the social medias about how West Virginia can be a sleeper team and how they'll be a sleeper team in the Big 12 Conference, which you just never know anymore in college football. There always is a few teams that we don't expect to do well. They just fly under the radar and they just start winning games. They start going on runs. And next thing we know, we're talking about them being serious contenders. But for Penn State, however, with this new 12-team playoff, a lot of people, including myself, feel like just about every single season, Penn State should be a lock for the playoff. Because Penn State, in recent memory, they've gone 10-2, 9-3 fairly consistently, but they just haven't been able to win the big time games against the Ohio States and the Michigans of the world. And to an extent, this is going to be a big time game as well, but it's not against the Ohio States, the Michigans, and now with conference expansion, the Oregons of the world, or the USCs of the world, or even in recent memory, the Washingtons of the world. But with the expectations that West Virginia has of being a potential sleeper and a contender in the Big 12 Conference, Penn State defensive coordinator Manny Davis, he left for Duke in the offseason. So new defensive coordinator. They do return quarterback Drew Aller, running back Nicholas Singleton, and they did acquire former Ohio State receiver Julian Fleming in the transfer portal. And I think that's going to be a great fit for Julian Fleming. Is he was just buried in the depth chart at Ohio State. It's just really hard to establish yourself as a number one receiver at Ohio State because Ohio State, they just have so many different receivers, so many future first round receivers at Ohio State where it's tough to really make yourself stand out. And I think Julian Fleming will be able to do that in Happy Valley this season. And I have Penn State winning this game. I do think they win maybe a little more convincingly than what the public will probably say, because I think the public may say that West Virginia is going to keep this game close, which they can. It's week one. You just never know, as this is the first time that all these teams are coming out, except the teams that played in week 0. But I think Penn State wins this game by double digits. I'll be surprised, but not surprised at the same time, if West Virginia not only keeps this close, but they win the game outright and pull off the upset. But I just feel like this is a good opportunity for Penn State to take that next level, that next step this season, as they don't play against Michigan, but they do play against USC on the road. But it's USC's first season in the Big Ten, and we don't know how they're going to look in their first year in the Big Ten, which we're going to talk about USC in a little bit. But Penn State's schedule, it looks maybe a little more favorable to an extent when you look at it. Is we don't know what USC will look like. They don't play Michigan. They get Ohio State at home. They get Washington at home, which Kalen DeBoer left Washington for Alabama in the offseason. But I'm picking the Nittany Lions to win this game and start off their 2024 campaign strong. Miami and Florida, a game that feels like a trap no matter which way you go in this matchup. And I will explain that in a moment. Returning starters from last season, Miami has 17, 10 on offense, 7 on defense. Florida has 14, 8 on offense, and 6 on defense. Miami, they made some of the most noise in the transfer portal this past offseason. That sticks out to me the most. Cameron Ward at quarterback, the former Washington State quarterback, he was 8th in the FBS last season in passing yards with 3,736. And Damian Martinez had 1,185 rushing yards last season at Oregon State, which was in the top 25 in all of FBS. And those two are a big reason why I am absolutely sold on Miami this season. I think a lot of people are as well. Others may not be as much, but I am going to predict right here that I think Miami has what it takes to win 10 games this season. And if they can get past Florida, I think that would be no question at that point, as Miami, they have a very favorable schedule this season. And with that schedule, if they can win 10 games, that could at the very least give them an at-large bid for the college football playoff, as this is a 12-team playoff now. Florida, on the other hand, I don't think there has been a team that has had this tough of a schedule, at least that I've seen since I've started watching college football, than Florida has this season. They have the toughest schedule in all of college football. 8 preseason top 25 teams are on their schedule. And going into the season, Billy Napier is on the hot seat to a lot of people. He's the number 1 head coach on the hot seat, which I do understand that. But at the same time, will they really make the move and part ways with Billy Napier if they don't make it to a bowl game, for example, given that they do have this tough schedule? And I don't think the 2025 schedule does Florida any favors either. So we'll see how this season plays out for the Florida Gators. And it is going to be a hot one in this game. It's going to be in the middle of the afternoon. So I am anticipating there's going to be a lot of cramps in this game. This is going to be an absolute battle in the swamp this Saturday afternoon. It's going to be an endurance type of game given the weather, and it's important that they stay hydrated. And I did explain at the beginning of this segment here that this game feels like a trap no matter which way you go in this matchup. Miami right now is favored by 2.5 points, depending on where you look at for spreads. But it seems that the public is backing Florida in this matchup. And a big reason why they are is Florida is at home for this matchup. Despite their tough schedule this year, with this game being in the swamp, I am going to pick Florida in this game. And I feel like no matter where I go, I feel like I'm just going to be wrong. It's either you pick the favorite in Miami, the Vegas favorite in Miami, or pick Florida, the public favorite. And these are two teams that their head coaches are on the hot seat coming into this season. But I'm going to pick Florida to win this game, and I think it's going to be a 3-point victory for the Gators. And Florida's 2024 season with this daunting schedule gets off to a positive start based off this prediction. Up next, Clemson and Georgia. Both teams have 14 returning starters from last season. Clemson with 9 on offense and 5 on defense. Georgia with 7 on offense and 7 on defense. For Clemson, quarterback Cade Klubnik completed about 64% of his passes last season with 2,844 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. While Carson Beck was third in the FBS in passing yards last season with 3,941, which leads returning quarterbacks for 2024 from last season. Georgia also picked up Florida transferred running back Trevor Etienne, the brother of Travis Etienne in the transfer portal this past offseason, and he had 753 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns last season. While for Clemson, running back Phil Maffa had 965 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns in 2023. And Clemson, they started off last season 4-4 after 8 games, but they ended the season on a 5-game winning streak. So Clemson does have some momentum going into not only this game, but this season. But it is a tough task for the Clemson Tigers as they take on an angry Georgia Bulldogs team after they fell just short of making the college football playoff after losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game, and the committee left them out of the playoff. For Clemson to win, I'm wondering if Clemson's defense can keep Clemson in this game, as Georgia was able to extend drives last season as they converted on third down 55.2% of the time, which led the FBS. And also, Georgia was 5th in scoring offense and scoring defense last season. I am going to pick Georgia to win this game. There are quite a few question marks from these past couple of seasons, with Dabo Swinney not adapting to the transfer portal, being in denial at the transfer portal. Clemson was the only team besides the service academies, because the service academies are not allowed to use the transfer portal, that didn't make a single acquisition from the transfer portal, which, if Clemson does not have a good season in 2024, I'm wondering if they're going to tell Dabo Swinney he has to use the transfer portal, or he's going to be on the hot seat going into 2025. And there are some people that say that, well, if Clemson doesn't do well this year, then maybe they'll part ways with Dabo Swinney. I would be surprised if that happened. They'll probably just say, you have to use the transfer portal in the offseason, or else we'll put you on the hot seat. But I'm going to pick Georgia to win this game. I'm just not sure by how much, though, because if Clemson's defense can keep them in the game, and if Cade Klubnik, if he really takes that next big step, as Cade Klubnik had a lot of potential as he started his college career, but he hasn't been as strong as I thought and a lot of other people thought he would. Either way, I am picking the Bulldogs to win this game. USC and LSU. This matchup will be on Sunday night in Las Vegas. And this is a matchup of teams replacing Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. USC replacing Caleb Williams, LSU replacing Jaden Daniels. And what makes it even more interesting is last season, the quarterbacks for each of these respective teams, they had to keep their teams in games, as both defenses, they really were abysmal last season as far as points given up. USC especially. I'm curious to see how much improved both defenses are from a year ago. Two new quarterbacks for these teams, but we did get a small sample size of what these quarterbacks, what their potential just might be, as they did start for each of their teams' respective bowl games last season. For USC, Miller Moss went 23 for 33, 372 passing yards, 6 touchdown passes, and 1 interception against Louisville. And Garrett Nussmeier for LSU went 31 for 45 with 395 passing yards, 3 touchdown passes, and 1 interception. Despite these two quarterbacks being inexperienced when it comes to being a starter, I still think that we are in for a high-scoring game, as it is week 1, and I'm not completely sure how improved both of these teams' defenses are going to be in this game. I also wanted to point out that USC, this is their first game as a Big Ten team with conference realignment. And USC, they have been recruiting and building their defense for the Big Ten. They've moved on from Alex Grinch in the offseason. But I just want to see a few games with this new and improved, potentially USC defense before I could make a determination on how improved USC is going to be defensively. And this matchup is simply going to come down to which team adapts to having to replace their star power from a year ago. USC, they lost Caleb Williams, Marshawn Lloyd, Austin Jones, their top 2 rushers from 2023, Taj Washington, and Brendan Rice. While LSU, they lost Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors. They also lost Brian Thomas as well. As far as this game is concerned, as I have mentioned already, I do think this will be a high-scoring game. I'm predicting this matchup based off of who I think the better defense is for this matchup. Despite LSU losing 4 consecutive season openers ever since they won the national championship in 2019, 2020 they lost to Mississippi State, 2021 they lost to UCLA, 2022 and 2023 losses to Florida State. I do not think that this goes to 5 straight season openers lost for LSU. I think LSU's defense is the better one in this matchup, in a matchup of teams replacing Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks, and which defense will be improved the most from a year ago. Closing out the week 1 college football predictions with the college game day game of the week, Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Before these teams take the field to begin their season, both are dealing with major injuries. For Notre Dame, offensive tackle Charles Jagusah, the top offensive tackle on the team, is out for the season. For Texas A&M, running back Reuben Owens is out for the season. As far as replacing Charles Jagusah for the Irish, freshman Anthony Knapp will be starting in his place, and redshirt freshman Sam Pendleton will be starting at left guard on Saturday night. For returning starters, Notre Dame returns 15, Texas A&M returns 18. For Notre Dame, 6 on offense, 9 on defense. For Texas A&M, 9 on offense and 9 on defense. The quarterback matchup for this game. For Notre Dame, Riley Leonard, the former Duke quarterback, who was at Duke until the offseason when he transferred to Notre Dame, and Connor Wigman. He completed 68.9% of his passes last season for 979 passing yards, 8 touchdown passes, and 2 interceptions before sustaining a season-ending injury against Auburn last season. And I have talked a couple of times about how the A&M offense, it just looks more in sync with Connor Wigman at quarterback than any quarterback at A&M since Johnny Manziel. And as far as this matchup is concerned, I think there are a few things that are going A&M's way in this matchup. For starters, I think they're going to be having the advantage at the offensive line portion of this game, as they're going to be the more experienced offensive line in this matchup. I feel like if this game was going down to the trenches, if it came down to the trenches, I do think A&M has the edge, not only as far as the offensive line being more experienced, but the front for A&M's defense, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, and Purdue transfer Nick Scourton. I think they'd be able to have their way with the inexperienced Notre Dame offensive line. Marcus Freeman has said that he is comfortable with who they have starting on Saturday, but I do think A&M has the edge as far as those matchups within the matchup. And also, this is the first game for Texas A&M with Mike Elko as the head coach. And Mike Elko was recently at Duke with Riley Leonard. And Mike Elko, he knows Riley Leonard really well. He knows what he's good at. He knows what he needs to improve on. Plus, the crowd for A&M, as the night goes along, the louder the A&M crowd will be. So there's just so many factors that favor A&M in this matchup for me, that as much as A&M doesn't seem to do well when I back them in any sport, really, I feel like there's too many factors here that are favoring them for me to want to go against them. So I am picking Texas A&M to win this matchup. I just think there's too many things that are going right for A&M going into this matchup. So many advantages within this matchup for A&M not to win this game. But I do think this game is going to be close, but I think A&M wins at the end of the night. And that will do it for my Week 1 college football predictions. Comment your picks down below. Also like and share. Thank you for your support. Last week with the Week 0 predictions video, we gained 70 new subscribers from that video. Thank you for your support this week, and I hope to see you back next week. Enjoy the college football games this weekend, as there is football all weekend long, from Thursday up until Monday night. Have a good one, and enjoy the games.